This show is produced by the Hartman Media Company. For more information and links to all our great podcasts, visit hartmanmedia.com.
Welcome to the Creating Wealth Show with Jason Hartman. You're about to learn a new slant on investing, some exciting techniques, and fresh new approaches to the world's most historically proven asset class that will enable you to create more wealth and freedom than you ever thought possible. Jason is a genuine self-made multimillionaire who's actually been there and done it. He's a successful investor, lender, developer, and entrepreneur who's owned properties in 11 states, had hundreds of tenants, and been involved in thousands of real estate transactions. This program will help you follow in Jason's footsteps on the road to your financial independence day. You really can do it. And now, here's your host, Jason Hartman, with the complete solution for real estate investors.
Welcome, investors. Actually, I should say empowered investors. We got a great show for you today. Another case study of one of our listeners who has done incredible things with their real estate portfolio. But before we get into that, let's look at a couple of important things. And I have a question for you. Do you think politicians like power? It's an obvious answer. It's a rhetorical question, right? Of course they like power. That's why they're in the game, right? Politicians want to remain in power. Do you think politicians want to, as Sarah would say, our investment counselor Sarah would say, shoot themselves in the shoe instead of in the foot? Of course, they don't want to shoot themselves in the shoe now. Sometimes they do that. And by the way, that's a little bit of an insider joke if you haven't heard Sarah on the show before. She revises all these great old sayings. Shoot yourself in the foot is shoot yourself in the shoe. I love it. Anyway, of course they want to remain in power. Of course they don't want to shoot themselves in the foot. And they want to do things that are going to get them votes. They want to do things that are going to make their constituency happy. And they are sellouts. So let's understand that. Let's understand that's the way of the world. Let's understand it's not likely to change ever, right? Because that's just the way the human race is. The human race is fallen. We're all fallen creatures, right? Go back to scripture and read that and, understand that. And so since they like to stay in power, what are they going to do? What will be their actions? What actions will they take to keep buying votes? A lot of people wonder, will they attack this? Will they take this benefit away? Will they take away the punch bowl and end this gravy train of awesomeness that we call income property investing, real estate investing, right? Will they do that? Well, here's why they won't. Here is why they will do whatever they can to preserve the sacred cow known as the real estate industry. Look at this. This is an article from Real Trends, and it says real estate industry accounted for 16.9% of GDP, gross domestic product, in 2021. National Association of Realtors estimates that each home sale generated $113,000 of economic impact. Wow. 100. I mean, what other industry for every transaction generates $113,000 to the bottom line? And the way a politician looks at the bottom line, the way an economist looks at the bottom line is GDP, the size of the economy, the growth of the economy, gross domestic product. This is absolutely staggering. And nobody is going to want to kill this because it would literally be a career killer for a politician. Let's take a look further. The article talks about, and by the way, this must be a typo here. You see, if you're looking at my screen and you're seeing this on video, if you're just listening, I'll tell you what it says. It says the real estate industry was responsible for $3.9 billion, or nearly 17% of national GDP. That's a typo, because that would be 3.9 trillion to be 17% of GDP, okay? So clearly a typo. A billion, a trillion, what's the big deal, right? It's all just fiat money. But this is truly incredible, right? NAR estimates that nationwide, each home sale at a median generated roughly $113,000 of economic impact. That is staggering. What are those things? Commissions, right? Real estate agents, lenders, mortgage people, title companies, escrow companies, all of this stuff, right? Fees, moving expenses, and other income to real estate industries was responsible for an estimated $31,742 of total impact, with the rest comprised of $5,000 from expenditures related to the home purchase. By the way, I think that is incredibly low, that estimate. And $17,636 from a multiplier of housing-related expenditures. And here's the big one, $58,781 from new home construction. Wow. This is why this is a golden goose, a sacred cow. Is there another animal metaphor I can use? Right. I love animals, by the way. I told you about that, right? I told you my secret little pleasure that I love going online and watching these animal videos. Last night, I watched a great one. I watched a great one about a cat. A cat who was witnessing her baby's eyes opening for the first time. It was so cute. And then I watched another one about a big giant iguana. Those are kind of gross, but that acted like a dog. Yeah, I know. This is what I do in my spare time, folks. This is how I relieve the tension and the pressure. I watch animal videos on YouTube. Yeah, they do some amazing things, these animals. And, you know, maybe we ought to just think twice about how we treat them and how we eat them. And I eat them, okay? I tried being a vegetarian. I don't think it's healthy. I think we're omnivores. I think we're meant to. But, you know, at least let's acknowledge it, right? Like in the movie Avatar, that scene where the creature acknowledges when he's eating another animal. But lest we be on a tangent alert here, let's get back to business, okay? So, yeah, I had a great hamburger last night, by the way. I made oh no, that wasn't last night. That was the night before. I made brie cheese burgers. Oh, they're so good. Angus beef and brie cheese on top and some nutritional yeast on top, all on a cauliflower kind of flatbread thing. How healthy is that? That is super healthy. It's like 32 grams of protein with like 0 carbs. Wow. The meal of champions. Yeah. Maybe I should show you my recipe sometime. Okay. So the states that had the tangent is off now. The states that had the largest income generated per home sale in 2021 included Hawaii. Of course, expensive properties are going to generate more just by ratio. $306,000. DC, District of Columbia, $280,000. The Socialist Republic, well, these are all Socialist Republics, actually. You know, they have the higher home prices, right? So the Socialist Republic of California, $247,000. I'm rounding, obviously. Massachusetts, $192,000. Washington State, $188,000. I got to do the rounding, so I do now. And at the other end of the spectrum, more Arkansas, 62,800. West Virginia, 67,900. Oklahoma, 68,000, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so those are lower. But what's interesting about that is as a ratio. See, never think in absolute dollars because it doesn't answer life's most important questions or question. Life's most important question is compared to what? And percentages and ratios answer that question. So as a ratio, Hawaii, California, Massachusetts, etc., did not generate as much income for the GDP, because that's a country's income essentially, or, you know, the size of its economy, I would compare it to income, GDP, not net worth, because obviously net worth would be different, right? So the ratio is actually higher in lower priced linear markets. That's interesting. Okay. So last year, 6.12 million existing homes were sold, and an estimated 761,000 new homes were sold. No one is going to risk their political career by not supporting the sacred cow, the golden goose of the real estate industry. It just ain't gonna happen, folks. Listen, you always want to align your interest with the most powerful forces the human race has ever known. Governments, central banks. And you might say, well, Jason, the central bank isn't political. Wrong. I pushed the wrong button there if you heard that. Wrong. That is wrong. The central bank is most definitely political, even though they say they're not. But they say they're not a lot of things. Okay, now here, this is interesting too, just a side note here before we get to our guest today. Possibly another reason to leave the Socialist Republic of California. I left 11 years ago, one of the best decisions of my life. And, I'm just going to guess, but I do not know. This is just a guess. I want you to know when I'm guessing, I want to say I'm guessing, or if I'm projecting, I'm projecting. I think you can mostly tell, but on the screen, it says, yet another reason to leave California. Can a debt collector go after my IRA? I saw this posted on Finance Brand. And the answer to this question was assets are fully protected from creditors in both types of retirement accounts. But in California, creditors may come after any IRA assets not deemed necessary for living expenses. They may also come after any distributions you take from your IRA. Wow, that's pretty scary. Remember, folks, this stuff varies state by state. And generally speaking, left-leaning states offer little to no protection for you, for us, right? That's why I'm glad I live in Florida, okay? Because there are just all sorts of little things that you just don't know. Your life insurance policies, if you have them. How protected are they? That varies by state. Your IRA, like this post says, it varies from state to state. See, your assets, what this is saying is the assets in your IRA, it might be a regular IRA or a Roth IRA, doesn't matter, right? They're generally protected from creditors if you have some kind of creditor coming after you. But in California, some judge is going to make a decision on whether or not, or maybe a jury, I don't know, is going to make a decision on whether or not this amount of money is deemed necessary for your living expenses. That's pretty scary. So listen, you have got to engage in asset protection strategies, okay? And go to our website, reach out to our investment counselors for more on that, and go to jasonhartman.com/protect. That's jasonhartman.com/protect. And check out a webinar with our lawyer that we're affiliated with on asset protection. That's a free web class. You just got to understand this stuff, folks. It's just really, really important. Okay, there's a couple other things I wanted to go over, but in the interest of time, we've got to get to our guest today. And she is awesome. You're going to love this story. And let's go to that right now. And let's listen to Kim's story about building her real estate portfolio. Here we go. It is my pleasure to bring one of our listeners onto the show, and she's been listening for quite a while, I think, and reaches out to me once in a while. We have some great conversations, and we finally thought it's time to get her on the show. Kim Hopkins, she's the owner of Iron Peak Properties, and they own and manage over 350,000 square feet of real estate in Oregon, Washington, Utah, Texas, and Arizona, with a focus on multi-tenant industrial properties. They take pride in helping businesses succeed and being a direct part of the most fundamental activities in free market capitalism. I just love where her head is at about all kinds of things. She's a former corporate person, but got out of the rat race after reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Kim, welcome. It's great to have you.
Thank you so much, Jason. And before we get started, I just want to say that, I wouldn't call myself a groupie of Jason Hartman, but it's close. I love your podcast and I've gotten so much out of it. I've really learned a lot, and not just real estate. I basically use you as my news outsource now as well. So thank you so much for having me.
Well, that's great. That's really great. And how long have you been listening to the show?
Oh, geez, at least, I think, 4 years, maybe longer, because I remember saying that my kids, while they were, in utero, would recognize Jason's voice because I listened to your podcast so much.
I love it. The kids in the womb are getting this great content early. That's fantastic. That's fantastic.
He came out saying, compared to what?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that could drive you crazy as a parent, right? Yeah. Good stuff. Well, Kim, give us a little bit of your background. And, you reached out to me specifically after the show I did on how the government and the elites and the mainstream media wants to keep people apart. And you had some really interesting stuff to share with me about that, but you were quite on the career path, in a heavy way. You've got all sorts of great credentials, and something changed for you along the way, right?
Yeah. So I actually had two kind of separate career paths before I embarked on my real estate journey. So, I wasn't that good of a student growing up. Actually, I was often late and, not paying attention in class, but I ended up going to college at UC Santa Barbara and got into math, primarily because you didn't have to show up for a class or send in your homework. You just had to take the tests. So,
well, you know what UC Santa Barbara stands for? UCSB. You can study buzzed.
Our motto at the time. Yeah, the motto at the time was 5 years, 5 bikes. And I think actually now it's considered a good school, but back then partied pretty hard until my boyfriend, then husband, made fun of me, but ended up getting into math classes and just kept getting encouraged along that route. The professors were really excited to have a female in math that was excelling, and very supportive mentorship along the way. So I ended up going to grad school actually in mathematics on a fellowship at UT Austin and got a PhD in mathematics. I try not to talk about that too much because I feel like Robert Kiyosaki would make fun of me, and I make fun of myself for being overeducated.
Yeah. Well, were you a C student at one time, at least? Because that's what he wants you to be. Yeah.
I was a C student. I had so many demerits for being late to class in high school that I had to do community service to graduate.
Yeah. Wow. But you obviously turned that around and became an academic, right?
I did. I was really looking for something to put my energy into. And I loved that math at the higher levels is creating something. It's almost an art. You're proving something that has never been proven before. And so without that mentorship and entrepreneurship, and without any business classes under my belt, that was kind of the first thing I thought of was, okay, I'm going to go into math so I can create new things,
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah. So got my PhD from UT Austin and went out to UCLA as a professor. And basically the second I got there, I thought, what have I done? What have I done for the past 6 years? I used to say that the math papers might as well be written in Chinese because the first sentence is completely incomprehensible. It'll take you 2 days to work through the first sentence of the math paper. And I remember walking into my mentor's office in Los Angeles, and he said, I have this 200-year-old book that's written in German. Maybe you could find something new in here that hasn't been proven yet. And I just thought, what am I doing? This doesn't help anyone. This isn't building anything, and I read a article in Inc. magazine about diapers.com. Do you remember that company?
I don't remember that company, but it wouldn't surprise me if there is such a company.
Yes. And they sold diapers out of their garage online. They were one of the first online businesses. And eventually they expanded and to the point where they were writing algorithms on the best way to box up the diapers to mail them to customers. And they got bought by Amazon for a sizable sum. And I thought, I want to do that. I want to build something, I want to be part of a big business or something like that. So, and by the way, just as an aside, the last straw for me in academia was giving a talk at UC Berkeley. I would say that half the audience was 80 years old and the other half was sleeping. And there was, some overlap in that Venn diagram, but I was just like, you don't care about this. I don't care about this. What am I doing here? And so I decided to get out of academia, and it was really hard.
Before you leave that academia subject, and maybe you're going to say that now, it was really hard. Tell the audience what you were telling me off air when we were talking about this, how there was this constant push because you were female to keep you in, and people really gave you a hard time about your thoughts of leaving mathematics, right? Tell us about that.
Well, and not to say that people gave me too hard of a time, but they more so really wanted me to stay because I was female and that I was representing females in mathematics. I remember that the head of Microsoft Research at the time, who was a female, who was kind of a mentor to me, said, it would be a tragedy for women in mathematics if you left mathematics. And I thought, what about me, And just as an aside, since you brought this up, have you ever heard the phrase, the imposter syndrome?
Yes.
So that was a big conversation topic in academia, especially among the women, that, we often felt like we didn't belong and that we weren't good enough at what we were doing, that there were these, and they often were men. There were some females too. So I don't want to say it was just men, but, the really successful people just did the math research every second of the day. No life outside of math, which, similar to the corporate world as well, but no life outside of math research, never looked up. Oh, by the way, math joke. So how do you tell an extroverted from an introverted mathematician?
A math joke. I don't know the answer.
The extroverted mathematician stares at the other person's shoes.
Oh, got it. Okay.
So we had these people who were just so into it. And so we talked a lot about the imposter syndrome and making you feel like you were good enough and everything. And I would kind of encourage people that if you are feeling the imposter syndrome, maybe you should listen to that. Like, maybe math research wasn't the right thing for me. And I hate to say it, but maybe I was propped up with I won national awards. I had a National Science Foundation. Maybe some of that was because I was a woman instead of what I had contributed, and
doesn't that make you feel bad? That's why affirmative action is so demoralizing, because, to someone who got promoted or got an award or something, right? They know deep down inside they didn't earn it, right? And that's a demoralizing feeling, right? You feel good about something when you earn it, when you go out and get it, when you make the sacrifices, you endure the struggle. It's like the Whitney Houston song, One Moment in Time. I love that song, by the way. It's like, give me my one moment in time. I've practiced for it all my life. And, I'm going to show the world I can do it. And that kind of social promotion, affirmative action mentality, I don't want to say specifically, it's broader than that, is really just demoralizing, isn't it?
Yes. And even if you feel like you did earn it, even if you don't know if there was something left to some social aspect to it, but if you feel like you did earn it, that's almost worse, because now you're in this position and you're not enjoying yourself. You don't feel like you excel at what you're doing, and no one should be in that situation. And the answer, a lot of people want to say the answer is to make you feel like you belong. And I would propose an alternative viewpoint, which is, hey, how about you find something you're really good at?
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. So tell us more.
Sure. So I didn't feel like I belonged in academia. I was a social person. I was an outgoing person, and I wanted to do something that mattered to society, that built something. And so I got inspired by reading these business magazines, and I went on a job hunt, and it was very difficult. It was actually one of the hardest times of my life, because I was very overqualified and very underqualified all at the same time. I remember trying to take the PhD off my resume to try to get jobs, because people would say I was overeducated. But at the same time, I didn't have real world job experience. I had taught in academia, but I didn't have real world job experience. And so at the end of the day, I managed to secure a job offer for one of those management consulting companies. You know, the ones.
Yeah, like McKinsey or
Yes, like the ones that only people who have no practical knowledge of the real world, but very
they can
educated.
bill you out at $900 an hour. So,
Oh gosh, it's a topic for another time. I could really go off on that. But so I had an offer from one of those companies, and then I had an offer from a small startup that did tax credits for businesses. And they were offering a third of what the management consulting company paid. But the CEO of the startup said to me that your opportunity is only limited by your contribution. And basically you can grow as fast as you can contribute. And the management consulting company said, hey, you have to do this position for 3 years, and then you'll be evaluated for the next position. And I've never liked to be told what to do or put in a box. And so I went with the startup.
Yeah. So that was the corporate thing versus the startup culture. Good. Yeah.
Yeah. So the startup culture was great. I love that. I think if everyone could work for a startup, it's an incredible experience because you get to wear all these hats. So I have no regrets about the business. And I did end up working my way up. So we did tax credits for big companies, R&D tax credits. And we worked for very large companies like Deckers, Ralph Lauren, Calvin Klein, big companies. And I ended up replacing myself by writing a computer program that would do my job for me using YouTube videos on Excel. And so then I moved into managing about half the company and director of operations for that. And then I moved into sales and that area and, helping build the business. And it was great. I learned a lot, but I realized that once again, I may have leaned my ladder against the wrong building because this corporate lifestyle that once again, society had encouraged me to undertake had a lot of downsides to it. I don't want to work when I'm on vacation with my husband in Singapore. I don't want to be on call, and I don't want to answer a phone in the middle of the night. And, working 60 hours a week at the cost of your health and an hour commute each way in Los Angeles, that gets old really quickly. So that's kind of where I was in terms of the corporate situation.
Right. So what did you do?
So in 2014, I know it's so cliche, but it's so true. I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And I said to my husband, you got to read this book. And we decided that we wanted financial freedom, that we wanted to be entrepreneurs and be our own boss and build a real estate investment for ourselves. And so we made a 5-year plan to replace our W-2 income with passive income. And the 5-year plan alternated buildings and properties. So buildings and babies. So we did property, baby, property, baby.
Yep.
And it worked. I quit my job at the end of 2018 on time and under budget.
Right.
And that, ever since then, we've been doing the real estate full time and listening to Jason Hartman.
Yeah, fantastic. That's great, especially the listening to Jason Hartman part.
Yeah, I'd throw that in.
So you basically consider yourself, I think, sort of retired or semi-retired, right?
We work pretty hard, but pretty hard is, 5 hours a day on a rough day.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Okay. Yeah.
And you know how it is in the entrepreneurial world. It's like you no longer have hours and you're your own boss, but you also end up talking about, a painting problem at 8:00 at night. So I wouldn't consider myself retired, but I'm definitely retired from the W-2 corporate America.
Yeah. Yeah. Good stuff. And so what did your husband do before you both got into the real estate side?
So he was also in academia. He has a PhD in microbiology. And then he also... Oh,
he's a biologist. Maybe he can tell us what a woman is.
I often ask him, are you really a biologist? Yeah. Ask him questions about COVID, the vaccine and stuff. And he'd be like, okay. But anyway, so he was a biologist. And then he also quit his academic job around the same time I did. And he went to work for LabCorp. LabCorp? Yeah,
I've heard of them. Yeah.
They're huge. They do all your blood testing and everything. Right. And he actually disliked his job so much that he couldn't make it to the end of our 5-year plan. In 2017, he decided that he needed to get out of this job. And so we actually figured out that if he would support me on my sales efforts for the tax credits, that we could replace his income with extra commission from my job. And so I don't know, I probably shouldn't be saying this on the air, but we set him up with an access to my email, and he would do all the follow-ups for my sales work. And so I became the top salesperson, and the extra commission, counted as placed
So
his salary.
when you've achieved the top rung in several things, it sounds like, right? Top salesperson, et cetera. Tell us about the stuff that you were talking to me about how, after I did that sort of controversial show on how the government and the mainstream media wants to see people separated. They want to sow the seeds of discontent. So people either never marry, or if they are married, or if they did pair bond, they split up. And there's this just constant harping on that. I've just noticed it in the media, in movies, in TV shows. It's just all over the place. It's amazing how strong that drift is in society. It's just a very strong drift, very powerful. What was the aha thing in that show I was talking about, where I talked about that?
Yeah. So, I have a real advantage that I got married young. I got married right out of college. So I was 22. And I hate to say it, but I think if that hadn't happened, I might be victim to what you're saying, what the society is pushing and everything, because it's so easy to get into that trap of believing that this job you have in corporate America is so important. Yeah. And what you're doing for your job is so important. And you replying to your boss's email at midnight is so important. Yeah. And you don't realize it till you realize it, that that's a joke, you you have one life to live. Why are you living it for this other person and making money for them? So I had the advantage of getting married young. And so when I was in corporate America, I saw what it did to my married life, to the time I had to spend with my family. And I saw that there has to be a better way here, And so to your point about what you were talking about, I remember reading Lean In. Do you remember that book by Sheryl Sandberg?
Sheryl Sandberg.
Yeah. And that got you going towards the corporate America ladder. Right. And now looking back,
sold the myth. Yeah.
Yeah. And now I'd make the book called Lean Out, exactly. Because it's very glamorous while you're seeing all these executives in your company, and you want to be one of them, and you want to be in on those 12-hour meetings all day in that boardroom. What's going on in there,
What a joke. Yeah.
And then once you've made it, you're like, oh, this is horrible, So that's what made me think about it is, just the constant pressure society puts, like we were talking earlier, everyone was pushing women in big tech. Right. And my question was always, I'm sorry, what's wrong with nursing? Like 90% of nurses are women. And I think that's a very important job. Don't you? Why is big tech so important? Right. And even more important, like, why is being a mother not an important job?
Right. They've totally minimized the importance. They've so marginalized the whole idea of being a mom, which I would argue is life's most important job, right? Being a dad's important too, but, mothers get more credit when it comes to the family side for sure. They've just completely marginalized that. It's like they make these young women feel worthless if they just want to be a mom. Like what's wrong with that? Why should that be that they're almost vilified? You're like a loser if you don't pursue the corporatocracy, and then the whole narrative of, women's rights and women need to be independent so that they're not oppressed by men. Well, guess what? They're being oppressed by corporations. Okay.
Yes.
I mean, these big corporations are using them like pawns. It is unbelievable. It's like they feed them this whole narrative of, just go extinct. That's not important, that you might want to have a family, right? No, you need to work for the corporatocracy, because guess what? You're going to produce tax revenue for the government. You're going to produce more GDP for the overall economy. You're going to likely end up single. And when you end up single, you're going to be a bigger consumer when there's two people consuming instead of one. Guess what? Married people live together. They share things. Single people live apart. They don't share things. It's two sofas, two coffee makers, two of everything if you're not a couple. And it's just one of most everything if you are a couple, because you just share it in the same household. I mean, it doubles the size of the market for these big corporations. Of course, that's their goal. Of course, it's their narrative. It doubles the tax base. It doubles the GDP of the country. I mean, how do people not see this? Am I the only one that figured that out?
100%. And it also, just to add to that, everything you said is completely true. And to add on top of that, so first of all, you have the group of women who are now getting married when they're 40, which makes it hard to have kids and hard to start a family.
But one note on that. All these companies, like the big tech companies you mentioned, they offer egg freezing services, right? Well, why do you think Google is so generous and they will freeze your eggs for free? Because guess what? They don't want you to have kids. They don't want you to leave the workforce. They need you there being a slave to the corporatocracy. And so, the likelihood is you'll just put it off and never do it, right? Yep. Or at least you'll just put it off in general. I mean, it's just such an obvious thing to me. I don't know why everybody just doesn't see it. But go ahead with what you're saying.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And also just the stress that this career, where are you going to go from there? So let's say you do freeze your eggs, which is fine. And now you've had kids, which is great. But where is this career trajectory going? And I don't want to say this applies to everyone, and it's not just females either. But, if you have a demanding job like this, where the only direction is up, it's not like when you become the next level of executive, your hours get reduced, right?
No, it's the opposite. Yeah.
And so now you have the nanny raising the kids, and now that costs money. And so now instead of reducing your expense, you're increasing your expense to keep up with this career you have.
You're stimulating the economy.
Yeah.
Because you're providing more employment for the nanny. And of course, you don't get to know your kids. And then your kids end up in a drug rehab facility because you weren't there to parent them, right? So that costs more money. And this is just all economic stimulation. The part I didn't say about the egg freezing is that's more revenue. It's more revenue into the economy, the medical industrial complex, late term pregnancies, that happen at age 35, 40, 45 years old, or even older sometimes. That's way more expensive than pregnancy in the 20s, right? So look at all this money there is to be made. Of course, we better push the narrative.
And I would like to just bring it back to real estate for a second and say that this is one of the beautiful things about real estate is that, I can kind of have my cake and eat it too. I've been able to build a sizable real estate portfolio. We have over 350,000 square feet.
Right.
And I have that lifestyle design. I was telling you off air, a 5-hour workday is a really long day for me.
Wow, that's fantastic.
And we're working from home before it was cool,
right?
Before it was a thing, and I get to work with my husband. That's another thing, by the way, is like you're spending all these hours at work. Well, I really hope that the people you work with are fantastic people, because, I read, you keep reading over and over that you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Yeah. And don't you want to hand select those people? No offense, but a lot of people I worked with, I didn't really want to hang out with that much, And so now I get to choose to spend time with the people I want to spend time with. And so it works for me. And then if you do want to be a full-time mom, that's great too. I was just talking to a girlfriend whose husband has a very demanding job. And he says to her, look, I need you. This job you're doing of taking care of these kids is essential. Someone needs to stay home and take care of these kids and raise them. And, I have another girlfriend with 6 kids, and she says, oh, this is my purpose. I am building a civilization. Right. And that's the way to think about it.
That's a great way to put it. I love that. Okay, wait, we need a sound effect for that one. I am building a civilization. That's what moms do. Yeah. Being a mom is important. Yeah, good stuff. Yeah. This ought to be the Mother's Day show.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah, go ahead. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's what I was saying. It's just that, you don't have to give up your career. You can have a purposeful life and build a business that's not, you don't have to just focus on your children. I'm just saying that the viewpoint that the corporate America and climbing that corporate ladder, the viewpoint that is superior to prioritizing your own lifestyle design and your objectives for your personal life, I disagree with that viewpoint. You know?
I couldn't agree more. And what's interesting too, in addition to all the stuff we mentioned about, trying to split up the idea of pair bonding and so forth and just destroy and decimate the family, which is not something they're attempting to do. It's something they've accomplished. It's seriously been accomplished. Okay. I mean, regardless of what wave of feminism you're talking about, that has been a huge success for the elites. They have achieved their goal and they're continuing to dig in even further and go further. But the other part of it is Edward Bernays, who I've talked about on the show before. Everybody should look up and learn about Edward Bernays, because in about the 1920s or so, he was one of the people that really invented the idea of modern advertising and modern public relations. And then, of course, we're all familiar with the series Mad Men, so people got to understand Madison Avenue a little bit, that came later after Edward Bernays. And before that, Kim, it was interesting. Americans were like pretty content people. They would work. A lot of it was on farms and agriculture, right? And some were participating certainly in the Industrial Revolution in the late 1800s and beyond that, of course. But they had some sort of degree of like balance in their life. But now we've all been sold this idea. And look, to hear me saying this might be a surprise to some people. Okay. And maybe it's because, I've achieved, I think, a lot, and I've got more money than I can really spend, at least prudently. I guess you could always spend it, right? But like there's this hyper greed. And it's just decimating the culture. It is really, really something how this hyper amount of greed has occurred. And, that's part of it. It's the advertising culture, right? Mm-hmm. And that's gotten people on that career path that you talk about.
Yes, absolutely. Totally agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah. Good stuff. Well, maybe we should wrap it up. I mean, we've kind of ranted about this stuff a little bit, but what do you see happening next? I mean, do we have any prescription for these societal ills that we've been talking about?
Well, I would say one prescription. I think my friend said, who works for corporate America, that she feels like she's constantly drinking from a fire hose. Uh-huh. And I'm really empathetic with that, because with the family life and the work life and just all the responsibilities we have nowadays, it can really feel that way. So first, I just want to offer my empathy that for those of you that are working all hours and then coming home and taking care of those kids, which are exhausting, or just, whatever you've got going on in your personal life, it's a lot. In terms of the prescription, what I encourage people to do is really start top down. Before you lean the ladder against the building, know what is at the top of it. Yeah. What are you actually shooting for? So to my point earlier about the job in corporate America, when you are climbing that ladder, when you're trying to get that promotion, you're so in that moment. All I want is more money. All I want is the next promotion, Yep. And you don't take a step back and think about what's at the top of this. Like, what's the end game here? Is my goal to be 50 years old, working for this company now 80-hour weeks and making X? And if my goal is to make X, why do I need X? What am I using X for? So when we did our 5-year plan in 2014, we started with lifestyle design. I should have had it ready to read to you, but we had a mission statement, and it had to do with, for me, going to CrossFit. I'm part of the CrossFit cult. You should join. Going to CrossFit for a leisurely midday workout, wearing Lululemon all the time, spending time with my husband and my family and friends that I choose to spend time with, and building this real estate empire that replaces our cash flow and allows us to do all the activities and adventures we want to do. So my prescription is to start with the end goal in mind. And when I say end goal, it should be what your day-to-day looks like, because, if your end goal is to make $1 million a year, that's not a good end goal, because you're not going to sit there each day of your life thinking, well, I made $1 million. Today's a good day. Yeah, well, right. I made $1 million, So what does your day-to-day look like? Really write it out. Like, I wake up in the morning at this time. I don't use an alarm. Right. I walk my kids to school. I go out to date night once a week with my family. That goes into the budget, right? So start with the end goal in mind on what your day-to-day lifestyle is, because that's all we have is the day-to-day. And then work your way into that instead of going the other direction and just like, hey, we were talking about this earlier offline. It even happens in real estate where people end up making this a job for themselves, and that's great if you're using that money to get towards that end goal, but you need that end goal in mind so that you're not just constantly creating a new rat race for yourself.
Right, exactly. And what you're saying is precisely what Stephen Covey talks about in his book, Begin with the End in Mind, and also in the 7 Habits book. And he says, people climb the ladder of success, they get to the top, and then they realize it's leaning against the wrong wall. And that is such a good point. It really is. So first off, take a look and see what wall it's leaning against before you climb up too far. Because it may not be the wall you want to lean against, and at the end of one's life, they're not going to care about any of this. There's no luggage racks on the hearse, right?
Yes. Yeah. And once you have decided what your end goal is in mind, and if the answer for you is real estate, go look at Jason's information online, because I send all my friends to your website, because the cash flow underwriting you have is a great place to start, and just look at the properties and understand the math and start there. Start with the numbers to get you to where you want to be if you choose real estate as your method of achieving your end goal.
And it's a great method. I mean, you obviously chose it. You did other things beforehand. Real estate it's definitely the best thing going, if you ask me. So good stuff.
Me too.
Kim, thank you so much for joining us. Really awesome discussion. We really appreciate it. And I'm sure your story is going to inspire a lot of people. So we really appreciate you sharing it on the show.
Thanks, Jason. I appreciate everything you do.
Jason, aloha from the big island of Hawaii. Hey, it's Andrew Freitas from Vancouver, Washington. Yesterday, I met with a notary here on the island and signed for a cash-out refi for my very first property I bought through your network about 4 years and 11 months to the exact day. I cashed out refied. I got all my money back out of the property and put another $6,500 in my pocket. My liability is now zero in the property. I've got some extra cash in my pocket, and all while on vacation in Hawaii.
Thank you so much for listening. Please be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss any episodes. Be sure to check out the show's specific website and our general website, hartmanmedia.com, for appropriate disclaimers and terms of service. Remember that guest opinions are their own, and if you require specific legal or tax advice or advice in any other specialized area, please consult an appropriate professional. And we also very much appreciate you reviewing the show. Please go to iTunes or Stitcher Radio or whatever platform you're using and write a review for the show. We would very much appreciate that. And be sure to make it official and subscribe so you do not miss any episodes. We look forward to seeing you on the next episode.